I might mention that if you're visiting this morning, we're in a topic that sometimes gets a little deep, and it is Bible based. We're on a subject of Christian evidences. Last week we got probably is one of the most it delved into a lot of scientific information, and I hope I didn't run off any visitors or them leaving here thinking, wow, did we really enter a Bible study over here, type of thing, because we got into a lot of material. But I don't know any other way to do it. When we look at dating methods and this kind of thing, if you're confronted as a Christian with this type of material, it's good to know what's out there and what you could be confronted with, and have a basic knowledge of this. And that's why it's, in my view, it's essential that we have just some basics on that. That this type of dating, you don't have to be baffled by it. It's, in my opinion, it's just false. It's false. A lot of this isotope dating that they have out there is guesswork. It's not based on any hard science as such. Yes, radiocarbon dating is, to some extent, going back a few years, has some merit. But when you get into, you know, radioactive dating and then making the assumptions that they make, it's just silly to make those kind of projections and then be dogmatic about it and put it in textbooks and try to make people believe this. And we need to be aware of that. And then having said that, you know, it's just something that when we talk about it in a class like this, sometimes a lot of people take offense to that. So I wanted to make that clear that this is a Bible study. And this morning we're going to talk a little more. We're going to delve into the Bible. We are going to get into some other material, but I just wanted to make that point. Let's start the class with a prayer, please. Our God and our Father in heaven, we thank you for this time that we have to look into your word, to look at some of the marvelous creatures that you have created. Help us to have an open mind and an open heart, Father. Help us to be prepared to talk to others who confront us on this, and have the information that we need and the confidence to just plant seed with them, Father, and do so with a loving heart, to draw them closer to you, and eventually, hopefully, to let them see the truth and your Son. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay. This morning we're going to be talking about the Bible, man, and coexistence of man and dinosaur. And you may be, a lot of times Christians walk away from that just thinking that evolution, this just can't be. And we're going to, hopefully I'll change your mind a little bit about this morning. Christians sometimes respond to this completely denying it and say that, well, God created, when he created this earth, he created the fossils already in this earth, and therefore dinosaurs didn't exist at all. But that goes against Titus 1:2. God does not lie, and this would be deceptive on God's part if you think about it. Since we have evidence of dinosaurs existing, there's no question that God initially created them along with all other life. And Moses stated in Exodus 20, verse 11, "For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and all that in them is." So what's this leave out? It leaves nothing out. We also know from Genesis 1:24 that God created all land animals, including dinosaurs, on day 6, the same day he created man. Therefore, man and dinosaurs once lived together according to the Bible, and this is the end of the story. We as Christians need not think about this any further. I mean, God created all of his creatures, even though they're extinct now for a very good reason. But we walked together at one time, and the Bible says so. Where in the Bible do we find dinosaurs? This brings us to this question: where, if anywhere, do we find dinosaurs discussed? Here are some suggestions. The Bible is not a taxonomical book. Its main purpose is to tell us about God and his plan of salvation, redemption. Not just to list every animal God created. There are some animals that are not listed at all. Kangaroos, elephants, for instance. Does that mean that these animals didn't exist or cohabit with man because the Bible doesn't mention them? Of course not. The word dinosaur itself was not coined until 1842, 300 years after the first English translation, full, complete English translation. I think that was by Tyndale. One would not expect to find the term dinosaur then listed in the Bible. And though most modern English Bible translators have elected to omit the term, gee, I wonder why, in versions produced after 1842, it doesn't mean that the original Bible writers refrained from doing so. In other words, the translation didn't come across as such. So the word dinosaur you don't find in there in our scripture. There's three words. The Hebrew word tannin, and that is describing in Job 7:12 is translated sea monster or sea serpent. It's a dinosaur-like, could be a plesiosaur, for instance. Isaiah 30 verse 7 is a reference made to a flying serpent, could be a pterodon, and God describes a behemoth and leviathan, and we're going to talk about these in a second, in Job 40 and 41. Interestingly, those last two words were not translated as such, they were transliterated. The original scribe didn't know what to do with those, they just translated them letter by letter into the different languages and said, you deal with it, we don't know exactly what this is. God's question to Job, subsequent to Satan's initial challenge to Job to test Job's faith in chapter 1 and proceeding for 30 chapters, where Job's friends tried to console him. Job, though remaining righteous before God, finally lashes out at God in frustration. In chapter 31 and verse 35, Job makes this comment. I assign now my defense. Let the Almighty answer me. Let my accuser put his indictment in writing. That's the harshest thing that Job ever commented to God. At this, God sits Job down and in 4 chapters begins to ask Job 50 of the most difficult questions imaginable. God's questions to Job. These are just a sample. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Who marked off its dimensions? Have the gates of death been shown to you? Have you comprehended the vast expanses of the earth? What is the way to the place where the lightning is dispersed, or place where the east winds are scattered over the earth? Who cuts a channel for the torrents of rain and path for the thunderstorm? Who endowed the heart with wisdom or gave understanding to the mind? An interesting note, we can only answer 8 to 10 of these questions with confidence today out of all those questions. These are the ones we're going to concentrate on this morning. God's question to Job in Job 40 verses 15 through 24. And you can, if you wanted to open to those, open to Job and look at this, we're going to look at both Behemoth and Leviathan and some of the this passage in a little bit of detail. Look at Behemoth, which I made with you, and which feeds on grass like an ox. What strength he has in his loins, what power in the muscles of his belly. His tail sways like a cedar. The sinews of his thighs are close knit. His bones are tubes of bronze. His limbs like the rods of iron. He ranks first among the works of God. That comment right there, to my understanding, means this is the largest creature God ever made. This is, he ranks first among the works, the creation of God. Yet his maker can approach him with his sword. The hills bring him their produce, and all the wild animals play nearby. None of the creatures are afraid of this of this behemoth. He's a vegetarian. Under the lotus plants he lies, hidden among the reeds in the marsh. The lotuses conceal him in the shadow. The poplars by the stream surround him. When the river rages, he is not alarmed. He is secure, though the Jordan should rage around his mouth. This creature is not afraid of a flood, no matter how high it is or how it rages. No fear of that. Can anyone capture him by the eyes or trap him and pierce his nose? This is an Apatosaurus, which could well be what this creature is as behemoth. Keeping in mind the word dinosaur was not invented or coined until the mid-1800s, behemoth seems likely to have been what we call today a dinosaur. Hebrew word behemoth was transliterated since the original scribes I mentioned earlier didn't know what it was. Most Bible footnotes attribute this, and you got to look at your own Bible and see what the footnote says, but most of them attribute this to a hippopotamus or an elephant, I believe. However, the text denies this. If you think about it, the text here describes the tail as that of a cedar. And if you know the tail of a hippopotamus or an elephant for that matter, it comes nothing close to that, nor are those two animals known for their powerful muscles and their bellies and so on and so forth. This is just man's excuse or trying to explain away what looks clearly like a reptile or a dinosaur. Here's a section that I think Christians run away from vehemently, and that's fire breathing, dragons. Could that be real? Another creature which could be described as dinosaur-like is recorded in the next chapter of Job 41. The Leviathan. And following are excerpts from this text. Can you pull in the Leviathan with a fish hook, or tie down his tongue with a rope? Any hope of subduing him is false. Who dares open the mouth, the doors of his mouth, ringed about with fearsome teeth? His back has rows of shields tightly sealed together. His snorting throws out flashes of light. Firebrands stream from his mouth. Sparks of fire shoot out. His chest is as hard as rock. When he raises up, the mighty are terrified. The sword that reaches him has no effect, nor does the spear. Arrows do not make him flee. His undersides are jagged potsherds, leaving a trail in the mud like a threshing sled. He makes the depths churn like a boiling cauldron. Nothing on earth is his equal, a creature without fear. This is just an artist's conception. Leviathan. Bible footnotes here indicate a crocodile or alligator. And again, this is denied by the text. If you look at the underside of a crocodile, that's the weak point. That's the top of a crocodile is hardened skin, but underside is very, very vulnerable. And even the Egyptians back then would hunt and subdue crocodiles. And God said, this creature you cannot approach, you cannot kill, you cannot, this kind of thing with this creature. And when it rises up, well, crocodiles have very small limbs. It doesn't rise up very far to scare people. And it makes the water churn when it goes through. Crocodiles don't do that. They're stealth when they go through the water. There's just so much about that doesn't make sense in that footnote. And again, there's reasons for that. The account of this creature has been criticized as an obvious fairy tale. As Christians, we need to keep two things in mind. First, 2 Timothy 3:16 and 17 validates that Scripture is God-breathed, and we need to take this seriously. And though parts of Scripture are poetic and sometimes figurative, this is not one of them. You put this in context, what's going on here. Job is being sat down, and God is explaining to him the universe and all the animals that he made. What point would it be for God to make a fictitious or mythical creature to make his point with Job? Would be none, you see. So it's totally out of context and makes no sense. Job could just say, well, God, there is no creature like that. What's your point? You see, it makes no sense if you look at what's going on. And here's another reason, fire breathing question mark. All animals, including dinosaurs, are designed by God. Creating one that breathes fire is not difficult for God. Nothing is too difficult for you. That's Jeremiah 32:17. Modern science affirms creatures today. There's many of them out there with abilities that are impressive, just as impressive as fire breathing. You've got electric eels. They can produce enough electricity to stun a horse. You've got the Komodo dragon. It stores bacteria in its teeth that, as I understand, if it can just graze a person, you have almost no hope of living. And yet it has antibodies, or it will not hurt the dragon, the Komodo dragon whatsoever. But the most impressive, I think, and we looked at this before when we talked about God's design, and that's this little beetle, this bombardier beetle. It stores 2 deadly chemicals in its body, and yet they don't bother this beetle when in its storage capacity. And then if it's threatened by a spider or another insect or another creature, it can mix these 2 in a chamber, and the temperature of that mixture goes up to boiling within a split second, and it's able to expel it, explode it, and shoot it in the face of its aggressor. Now, if you think about that, that's not too far-fetched from a creature breathing fire. It's taking 2 deadly chemicals and expelling it and shooting it. And how's it able to do that? God created it in such a way that it can do this. And there you are, all without hurting itself. That's another key. Evolution has no answer for this, by the way. And so it's just very interesting. Here's another, and when I heard this is a mechanism that I think has validity. Dr. Bert Thompson, who used to be associated with Apologetic Press, he was degreed both in veterinary medicine and microbiology. And he gave an example of one of his assignments as a veterinary doctor, and that is of cattle that when they eat too much vegetation, they have what's called bloating, and they fall down in the pasture and lay on their sides, and they're in quite a lot of pain. And to relieve that, and that pain is called by produces methane or gas within the cow, and you have to relieve it. And what they use is what's called a trocar, which is nothing more than like a hypodermic needle. They insert that to relieve the gas. Well, if you light the end of that trocar, the fire will shoot out about 3 or 4 feet. The Leviathan, if you multiply that by a number, 100-fold for the size of the creature, being a large water-dwelling beast, could very easily have built up methane gas. And again, just like the beetle, where he has pockets that God has created within the beetle, you could have a creature that has a pocket to contain the methane gas, and all it would take would be, a click of the tooth, or perhaps pick up a few rocks from the bottom of the ocean, a quick exhale, voila, you've got fire-breathing dragon. Don't know if that's the explanation or not, but there you are. It's a possibility. So when people say, gee, fairy tale, how could an animal possibly do that and not kill itself, or so on and so forth, there you are. Any questions on that? Yes, I think so. Yes, yes, I think so. Um, I think that as far as the demise, I think it was a slow demise of the dinosaur. I think when the ark landed, um, you know, all the creatures, and by the way, dinosaurs were on that ark, and it, not necessarily the 400-ton variety. It could have been, and likely was, a very small. A lot of the dinosaurs, the average dinosaur was about the size of a German Shepherd. By the way, if you take them all across the board, all you see is the large ones on in magazines and so on and so forth. But if you take them all in all, I've been told just about that size, about a medium-sized dog. And on the ark, who says that they couldn't have been infants or small, dinosaurs and so on and so forth that they could have taken across? They didn't have to be full adult creatures. But anyway, yeah, that's it. And I think what happened was they saw a different world entirely. That flood did more than imaginable, and it created mountains and valleys and so on and so forth. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the possibilities. Of course, we weren't there, so we don't know for sure, but that is a possibility. Yeah. Yeah. Do we lose our screen, guys? We're working on it. Okay. All right. Pick it up where I am here if I can find the notes here. If I don't get the screen back. Huh? Back at page 6. Gotcha. Okay. Now we're going to get into some contradictory evidence. Um, and this indicates coexistence of human beings and man. If dinosaurs and humans once lived together on Earth, as the Bible implies, and that's in Exodus 20, verse 11, it's logical to conclude that humans left behind some evidence. And it would have been of two different types of evidence. First, similar to how we take pictures. Of course, they didn't have cameras back then, but they would have left carvings or pictures of some kind, or model pottery, or done something to indicate what they saw. That would have been one way. The other way would have been to tell stories, legends, left testimony, and that's how a lot of history is recorded, is it not? Even the Bible is recorded and handed down. Well, stories are handed down, and it's credible. You go back, and if it's handed down, and you have respected people that it came from there. And at the back of this, if we get to it, there are two, Herodotus and Josephus, report seeing flying reptiles, and in a number of cases. And this is completely ignored, but this is testimony, and this is the other way that you can tell. And these are humans that were interacting with these creatures. So those are the two ways, and I'm trying to focus on the one that's very graphic, that shows. I'm hoping we get the screen back because you could see all this. It's in the flyers that I left out front, but I can describe it if we don't get this back for you, and then we can kind of take it from there. Let's just go ahead, and I'll just read from this example we'll just start with Herodotus. He's a Greek historian. This is from the story angle. Okay, Herodotus lived about 450 BC, and he made this comment. There is a place in Arabia to which I went on hearing of some winged serpents. And when I arrived there, I saw bones and spines of serpents in such quantities as it would be impossible to describe. The form of the serpent is like that of a water snake, but he has wings without feathers and is like that as possible to the wings of a bat. In other words, these weren't birds, these were flying, um, almost like a bat, but they were more like a water snake as such. And they pretty much describe a small flying reptile. Not all of the flying reptiles were huge. A lot of them were rather small, but it does describe that those things exist and interacted with man. And then you had Josephus, and he, of course, lived right around the 1st century. And he made this comment: when the ground was difficult, and this was about Moses and the Israelites he was writing, when the ground was difficult to be passed over because of the multitude of serpents, which it produced in vast numbers, some of which ascend out of the ground unseen and also fly in the air and do come upon men at unawares and do them a mischief. Moses made baskets like unto arks of sage and filled them with ibs, that's birds, and carried them along with them, which animal is the greatest enemy to serpents imaginable. For they fly with them, for they fly from them, and when they come near them, and as they fly, they are caught up and devoured by them. And that's quoted out of, the writings of Josephus. Okay, we got our little. See if I can get. Okay, there's the writings. All right, here's some physical evidence. I'm glad we got this back. This is, and this has been used and not used by some creationists. These are Paluxy River footprints. This is in Glen Rose, Texas. And the reason I say that is they have found that some of these have been faked. And so most creationists run away from these altogether. But let me see if I can put this on. This is it's supposedly in Cretaceous. It's about 60 million years old, according to evolution. And this is Henry Morris's statement. Here in the limestone beds are found a large number of dinosaur and human footprints. Trails cross each other with 2 cases where human dinosaur tracks overlap. They cannot be attributed to modern carvings, as the tracks were freshly exposed by excavation of overlaying strata at large in a large team of workers. I don't know if like there's a dinosaur track there. I'm trying to see one where they had there's the crossings of them right here. There's a human footprints. I think that's a dinosaur track around it here. And that's you can't tell from this picture. I think it shows up more in the print, but there's a human print inside of this. I think that's a dinosaur track in here around it. This one, and I'll just read the caption first. Much criticism has been levied against the prints as being either carved fakes or non-human for obvious reasons. In response, creationists have gone to great lengths to substantiate. The above left shows excavation. When we say it's been freshly excavated, simply means that they put bulldozers out there and went to the banks of this river and lifted up, and then they took, as these tracks come from underneath, so it's hard to get to ground that's well buried and then create a fake, is what they're saying. And you have the same left-right sequence coming out of this. And extensive tests have included cross-sectioning of various pressure points and expected mud push-ups done on these specimens. Above right shows a big toe impression right here. And what's interesting is that the heel point underneath this, where it's fossilized pretty much up here, you find the impression of the heel well below. If you're going to carve a fake, you can't do that because it's solid rock, and then you've got the same impression well below it. That's why I included this. That's unbelievable to be able to create a fake. You can carve a fake, but you can't do something like this, you see. All right, here's wall pictoglyphs. Dr. Samuel Hubbard, curator of archaeology at Oakland Museum, discovered wall carvings exploring the Havasupai Canyon. This is near Grand Canyon. And he was looking for ancient Indian relics, and it shows various animals, and one resembling a dinosaur. Hubbard, in discovering the find, made this statement: taken all in all, the reptile is depicted in the attitude in which man would most likely have seen him, reared on its hind legs, balancing with a long tail, either feeding or in a fighting position, possibly defending itself against a party of men. These carvings, dated long before the dinosaur bones were ever discovered in the mid-1800s, represent creatures the Indians obviously had seen to draw. Though skeptics claim they were imagined, all can be cross-referenced to known animals, including the dinosaur resembling the Edmontosaurus. In other words, in this, they have all sorts of other animals that are, living today and well known. This is one that was carved, and that is the dinosaur that it represents, but it's a dead-on ringer to that. And this is long before dinosaurs were discovered, the bones were, and so on and so forth. This is rather weighty evidence. This is the Acambaro figures. This is in Mexico. 1945, a German archaeologist, Waldemar Julesrud, discovered clay figurines buried at the foot of El Toro mountain near Acambaro, Mexico. Eventually, over 33,000 of these were found and identified from a Chupancaro, I think is how it's pronounced, culture, Indian culture. They know to have existed 800 BC to 200 AD. Samples from the non-dinosaur figures were sent for isotope testing in a Jersey lab. And interestingly, look at this, it's radiocarbon. Remember we talked about radiocarbon not really being valid over about 2,000 years, yet they tested this in 1955, and they got dates of 1640, 4530, and 1100 BC. 18 additional samples were sent to the University of Pittsburgh for further testing, and all gave dates of approximately 2500 BC. That's 4,500 years from present. Interestingly, the dates were withdrawn when they found out that these things depicted dinosaurs. One didn't come out at the top. This is basically, it says it's very precise. Some of these modelings. This is one of this particular dinosaur, and this is the iguanodon. It wasn't discovered until fairly recently that the tail of this creature was generally carried straight out. This is something that we didn't even know till recently, and yet these modelings from way back when show this. And you say, well, that's just a coincidence, but not so. There it is right there. Okay. And it came in. This is another picture on this. Prior to 1900, the large sauropod dinosaurs such as Diplodocus and Brachiosaurus were pictured in books and magazines as having a smooth backs. Just so happens in 1992, the article by this gentleman, he wrote this: recent discovery of fossilized sauropods skin impression reveals a significantly different appearance for these dinosaurs. The fossilized skin demonstrates that the median row and dermal spines were present. In other words, the back of the dinosaur had spines. This collection was discovered between 1945 and 1953. Got to get moving here. Even if a person attempted to fake these figurines, he would not have put spines on its backs, yet here they are. These are the spines that were found on these creatures. And again, it's a testament that these were not faked as such. If they were trying to fake them, they wouldn't have added those necessarily. Here's some more. I'm going to run through these real quick. You could read about these in here. I'm just going to jump through these. These are Peruvian burial stones, again, dated well before any dinosaurs were found. And you can see dinosaur depiction. There's a triceratops. There's the horns of it. There's a looks like a T-Rex right there. There's another dinosaur. There's a tapestry with a dinosaur. That's a typical Peruvian burial site. Again, this evidence is everywhere. Again, it's physical evidence of man and dinosaur living together. This is another interesting one over in northern England. And again, it's one of the bishops died. They buried him in the cathedral, which was typical back then. And just so happens on these brass strips, they intermix some Latin words and animals, and lo and behold, there you go. There's one that and of course the staff at the cathedral claim it to be a crocodile, but they have another one there that looks exactly like, well, a lot more like a crocodile. They name it as a crocodile, but they say these are crocodiles here. But you can be the judge of that. And here's more depictions from urns and seals and so on and so forth. I wanted to get into some other things here. The last couple minutes that we have. 1990, a well-preserved skeleton of T-Rex was discovered in the U.S. and brought to Montana State for testing. Some of the parts in the long bone were fossilized. Upon further investigation, it was found that they found soft tissue and hemoglobin in blood tissue. Was still recognizable. To acknowledge that a dinosaur bone could remain intact after, according to evolution, millions of years being fossilized is just incredible. So in other words, they found red blood cells. It speaks okay for maybe 1,000 years for something to still have that if it was fossilized in place, not millions and millions of years. And here's another case that they just found in 2005. And this is in other words, they stretched and in return, this is pliable, soft bone. And this is then another T-Rex. You don't see this being pronounced to any degree. And here again, we saw this before, but this just shows some of the different things. Dinosaur carvings. This is in supposedly this period. That was 135 or 225 million years ago, so on and so forth. This is extinct creatures living today. Numerous organisms have been found. According to evolution, they can't be, evolving from simple to complex, and in doing so, we should not expect the less capable to be living with the more capable, the less fit, as it were. Creationists, however, have no problem with this. God created all life in a few thousand years ago, and we would expect a continuance of a variety of life living together with only environmental adaptation as an agent causing any extinction, not anything else. This is a creature that was snagged off of the coast in Japan a few years ago. 1977, Japanese trawler, 4,000-pound decaying body of a possible plesiosaur in 900 feet deep water. Let's see, for fear of contaminating the ship's cargo, they released it. Critics have suggested this to be nothing more than a basking shark. So significant was this find, Japanese government made a stamp of this thing. More information on this. Before the crew released the creature back into the sea, they took measurements, photos, and cut off several fins for analysis. This is the drawings they made. This, by the way, is a basking shark skeleton. This is the skeleton of this creature. Testing was done on those fins. It wasn't a fish nor a mammal. It turned out to be a reptile. The argument this find was nothing more than a basking shark. You can judge for yourself. I mean, these things are out there. They exist. If you think about it, the environment of the sea is much different than the earth. If if creatures walked off the ark, and of course the environment was quite different, and they could not survive. But it's not far-fetched to think that some of the dinosaur-like creatures that lived in the waters could still be here to some extent. This is one that they confirm as a plesiosaur, washed up on Moore's Beach back in 1925. Neck was 20 foot long. This was confirmed by Dr. E.L. Walsh and featured in Skin Diver. What did the evolutionists do? They said it melted from glacial ice. It really wasn't around. I mean, they always have an excuse like this, you see. This is quite interesting. This was a link, we called it linked from fish to amphibian. This is a cross-paratant fish called a coelacanth, whose fossil remains in Cretaceous period 70 million years ago. However, it was caught in 1938 off the coast of Madagascar. This, for all intents and purposes, is a dinosaur type fish. It might as well have found a T-Rex to find this fish still living. Since then, 30 specimens have been found. And to make matters worse, this has been classified as an index fossil by evolutionists. In other words, when you find this fish in one of the strata of the column, you date that column by this fish's fossil. Yet here we are, they're living in the waters. How can that be true? Here's another one. I got a few minutes here. A sample off New Zealand. This was a sole survivor, a beakhead's fossil, supposedly 100 million years old. It's still living. Found this in New Zealand. These are other organisms found. Deep sea mollusk. This one is growing in my backyard right now. 1944. This is a Don redwood. They found this in the middle of China after proclaiming this has been extinct for 20 million years. They found it in China. They brought it over. It's quite popular now. And these are just a listing of all of the creatures found living. Why hasn't evolution taken place? You know. And we've got, I just listed all of them. We didn't get to a lot of these, but it's just, when you think of not only some of the evidence out there that shows that man and dinosaur in particular, which happens to be the poster child of evolution. You see, and all the kids are looking at dinosaurs, and this is the main thing that they honed in. Evolution's true because of all the dinosaurs that lived millions and millions of years ago. So if you show that man and dinosaur lived together, they vehemently, defend that and try to disprove that or keep that away from any information. It's so deadly to their theory that they'll do anything to keep this information away. So, but I wanted to bring this to you to show you that we don't have to be afraid as Christians to stand our ground on this kind of thing. And as far as the dinosaurs themselves, or even the comments about fire breathing and so on and so forth, we have answers for this. And all we need to do as Christians is to just plant the seed, not be confrontational as such, but just try to reveal some facts in as Peter says, do so with gentleness, and kindness to individuals. I think that's about it. Yeah, that's the end. Okay. Is there any comments? I know I've breezed through this rather rapidly. I wanted to get to a lot of this material for you. And next week we're going to look at a topic it's called theistic evolution. And it's where people try to marry evolution with the Bible and try to justify the two. We talk about day-age theory and gap theory, the days of creation being more than a 24-hour period and so on and so forth. We'll get into that a little bit next week. Thank you for your attention.